I've got mine on.
We're live, guys.
Lovely,
Okay.
thank you. So welcome to the Human Resources Committee meeting this morning. We've got an interesting agenda this morning, but before we formally start the meeting, I just need to confirm the agenda for this morning. There is an additional item which will take us in the exempt section of the meeting, which will be item 11, given that we have 10 agenda items, and this is changes to the permanent establishment. It wasn't on the original agenda, but I have agreed as chair to take it as an urgent item because we need to make a decision on this because it will affect service provision. So we will take that item in exempt part of the meeting this morning, if that's okay with everyone. So in which case, I think I've given apologies for absence for Councillor Javaid Khalil. Do we have any other apologies?
I don't have any further apologies, Chair.
Lovely. In which case, do we have any declarations of interest? And we just need to confirm that the minutes of our January meeting were accurate and a true record, which is fine with me, which takes us into the agenda of this morning, really, which is item 4, which is our HR update, which Tracy usually takes for us. And this is for us to note what's been happening in regards to HR within the service. Tracy, are you happy to present?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Hello. So this is the normal quarterly report that members receive on key HR metrics in the period since the last meeting. So if we start with sickness absence, so that covers the period from the 1st of October to the 31st of December, because as we've previously discussed, we work a quarter behind because of the dates of committee. So this is for quarter 3 of the absence year. You will see from the report that there has been an increase in absence in quarter 3 compared to previous quarters. I think we discussed this last time because we'd seen quite a significant decrease in the first part of the year. And we did say, obviously, think when things start to get back to normal, we may see this coming through. Quarter 3, obviously covering October, December, there's always usually some sort of seasonal variance for that quarter. Could be because obviously, you know, people come down with respiratory infections and things like that. So it's not unusual for quarter 3 to see a little bit of an increase. This increases across all the work groups, but it's still less in terms of total absence than in previous years, and it is still below the national sector average for the services. So although it is an increase on last time, it's sort of almost what we expect at this time of year. In the event, I think, for quarter 3, absence was very much affected by COVID. Because as you remember, we were moving into the next period of the lockdown at the time, and this had quite a significant effect in that we sort of lost about just under 400 days in total for people who either had a positive COVID result or were self-isolating. So I think, again, in quarter 3, as well as the seasonal sort of impact, there was also the COVID impact during that period. In pages 19 to 21 of the report, we do set out sort of the detailed reasons for absence against each work group, and you will see if you look at the table on there that COVID-related absence is significant both for the whole-time workforce and the on-call workforce, and to a lesser extent to the people who are undertaking support roles. So those pages that, as the appendix, do set out the main reasons for the absence during the period. So the main, other than for COVID, for operational personnel, tends to be musculoskeletal in nature, so injuries to lower limb, upper limb, back, things like that. And within the support workforce, it tends to be more that the highest instance of absence was for mental health issues, but that was 4 instances. so for staff. What we tend to find, as we said before, is that people who are absent with sort of mental health issues do tend to take that little bit longer to come back into the workplace. But obviously during that time, for any long-term absence, you know, we continue to provide support for people through our occupational health teams, through HR, and also through their line managers. So they're getting that continuing and ongoing support in order to get to the point where they can return to work at some future point, even if that's on for a time on modified duties. Long-term absence during the period accounted for nearly 60% of all absence. So that's absence that's certified by a GP and has gone on longer than 28 days. So that again forms a significant proportion of the absence for the period. In terms of national comparators, which is set out from 2.6 to 2.10. We do compare very favourably with the other fire and rescue services who take part in the National Absence Survey, and we are, even though there's been an increase in Q3, still below the sector average. So before I move on from absence, does anybody have any specific questions?
Yes, Chair, I've got a question.
Go ahead, John.
As regards absence, your report is excellent, has broke it down quite well, I think. But I'm still concerned about the huge increase. I mean, you got 73.3% increase. That's not just a small increase, that's a big increase. I know there's variable reasons for it, but it still seems a huge jump from when it was a much smaller. You got, can put this, from 73, gone to 73.3%. And it was from 774.58 days, we are talking 561.14 days. You know, it seems to be a big increase. I would say to you, I'm well aware of the various reasons for, but it still seems to me a rather big increase. And I'd like to continue from there. I don't know where the increases are. I've looked on page 13, disciplinary grievances look quite reasonably good. We'll come to that in a moment, actually. There'll be some explanation over the absenteeism. It does seem an awful lot.
Yeah, I think that is, well, for the reasons that I set out, that we were moving into that sort of second period of COVID, the second increase in COVID cases, and I think that did have an impact. And I think the comparison that we have there is with previous quarters, and the previous quarters had been so reduced compared, you know, to previous years and what we would normally see during quarters 1 and 2. That actually the percentage, if you look at it as a percentage, does seem quite significant. I see that, but to a certain extent, it's because the previous quarters were so low, so sort of out of the ordinary, really. I think we noted that at the time, didn't we? That these were,
yes, we did,
figures, and that might have been because people weren't mixing socially and at work. That those instances where you perhaps would have got infections, you know, people not coming to work because they had to travel to the workplace. Then, you know, that might have had a significant impact on those sickness levels. And I think it's primarily accounted for those reasons, Councillor.
I think when we get past the COVID emergency, shall we say, it might be a good idea to pay particular attention to absenteeism.
Yes.
And if it decreases back to pre-COVID levels, if not, then needs to be investigated. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that our absence levels this year compared to previous years are still reduced. You know, we've seen a significant decrease actually in sickness absence during the period. If you look at it, if you looked at it over the longer term, and I think we set out in the appendices a longer term view of absence. So at Appendix A, you will see that, you know, we take that over a number of previous years so we can compare. And you can see in the whole period graph there, the significant dip Can you see that? It goes right down.
Yes, I've seen the
and then it starts.
I've seen the charts.
Yes, and then it starts to creep up again, and I think that's why the absence as a percentage looks higher.
Yeah.
It does. Tremendously high, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, at one stage we got, what was it, 1,326.58 days. It's just something we need to keep an eye on all the time, I think.
Yes.
Absolutely we do.
Yeah.
I think Craig would like to comment.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think Tracy's point is right, but Councillor makes a good point about making sure when we come out of this unusual period, we don't sort of see increases above what would be our normal baseline. And as I think the report also covers, we need to look at the long term in excess of 28 days absence as a percentage of what that makes up, because that is something that we do seem to have a kind of 24 staff, it appears, 24 of our workforce as a total number all the time that is a hard nut to crack for longer periods of time. So we're not seeing anything, Councillor, that gives us any concern at the minute, but I think your point is right, is we just do need to keep an eye on it to make sure as we come back to where can we normalise, whatever that means for anybody.
Today.
We don't see increases above what we would consider the kind of like, the baseline that we would normally see.
I think Salma would like to contribute.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a quick question regarding have you got obviously a long-term strategy or a plan regarding the COVID cases? Obviously, now we are in pre-COVID. Are there any plans what you've got placed at the moment that will reduce the cases down?
Thank you, Salma. Craig, did you want to? Oh, Trace.
Yeah, I mean, I'll look for Tracy's help as well on some of the specifics, because obviously Tracy's as area manager of the people side of it. I suppose, Councillor, what we've got throughout, we've always had a strategic intent, and that is a document that's shared across the workforce about what our priorities for dealing with COVID. And that is updated every fortnight now through our business continuity management group. So that's basically all our heads of department, our area managers who work with Tracy. So we look at the priorities, we follow what was Public Health England and government guidance on addressing COVID. We've just had a meeting this week around the business continuity group around the national roadmap and applying guidance. So in terms of the preventative stuff, we meet every fortnight, and we have also a recovery group of middle managers who turn those strategic intentions really into how we deliver that. What I would also say is that we've done a personal, I suppose, risk assessments for people who feel they are more at risk to COVID or any underlying conditions, and they are reviewed by their line manager and our occupational health team. So whether we need to do reasonable adjustments for a longer period of time or not with people that may have long COVID.
Sure.
Because there is our operational firefighters, of course, have to do fitness tests. And there is some evidence nationally with people struggling with long COVID who are failing to meet the fitness standards. We've not seen that locally from our operational workforce as yet, but that is something we are aware of.
You're aware
and of course, members will also be aware we've got a health and wellbeing strategy that's been newly in place. Well, I say newly in place, so kind of a year or so now, really. So the health and wellbeing strategy about mental and physical health with a big focus. We've also re-tendered recently with all the work Tracy's been doing with the team for our employee assistance programme, which is, I think, if I get right, Tracy, because I keep seeing so many, it's a Bupa one this time.
Yeah, we're in the Bupa cashback plan scheme. All staff are registered in that unless they choose to opt out. And we also have what we call an employee assistance programme, which is basically telephone helplines. And people can ring that any time of the day or night. It's completely confidential. It's a completely separate health care provider. And they're able to ask basically for support across a number of different issues they may have. They may be mental health issues, if we've spoken about before, but they could be finance issues or legal issues or family issues that may be causing them anxiety or distress. and they are able to phone that helpline or do it by email or online if they choose to, 24/7. So we have a sort of number of provisions for people. Certainly within occupational health, we have links to counsellors in Relate. So we have a contract with Relate so that if we're aware that people may need that sort of support or counselling, we can put that in place.
That's great. Thank you. And thank you for your contributions, John and Salma. I'm going to suggest that we move on to the next item, if that's okay. Are we ready for that, Tracy? Or
yeah, the next part of the report just looks at general HR metrics. It's the section that's titled discipline grievances, etc.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can see that there are no new cases against those areas. There is still one employment tribunal case outstanding, which we referenced last time as well, but that won't be heard until later in the year, so it will probably be on the next update as well. Because the tribunal process, as you probably know, are quite a lot. They've got quite a backlog, so cases are taking that bit longer to conclude. So nothing specific, I think, on that part of the report. In terms of the establishment and staffing numbers, in terms of operational whole-time personnel, we're at -4, so we've got 4 vacancies. But as members will know from last time in the report that's coming up later in the meeting, we have recruited 28 new firefighter positions, the first course of which has started. So they became apprentice firefighter trainees this month. So they're at our Service Development Centre receiving their training. And then the next cohort will be starting their training in September. So that's part of our workforce planning. So we had predicted that, we would have a level of turnover, which would mean that we needed to recruit. So we did that last year, and now we're starting to see those people coming into the organisation and obviously filling gaps once they've been fully trained and are allocated to stations. So that's the operational whole-time numbers. In terms of on-call, we've seen an increase this year in the number of new starters in on-call roles, both directly through recruitment. I think we've had 20 new starters directly, but we've also had some more dual contact arrangements put in place, which is the arrangement by which our whole-time operational workforce also have a contract to provide on-call cover in their local area where they live. So we have sort of seen an increase in that over the last year. And in terms of support roles, I think we talked about this last time, there's been a number of additional fixed term appointments over the last year or so, some of that as a result of the transitional funding that the authority agreed to take forward our Change Agenda programme. So support establishment is in a good place. We've continued to recruit throughout the last year. It didn't stop us. We switched to sort of this Zoom type meetings to undertake interviews and things. So we've continued to recruit across the board. We haven't stopped. But in the last quarter, we appointed to 25 new roles, and we had 20 leavers. So in terms of the workforce planning that we do, we have just completed a review of the workforce plan to take us into 2023. And that report will be coming back to this committee at your next meeting. And that report has a lot more detailed analysis and forecasting really about what we can expect sort of over the next couple of years. So the establishment really, I think overall is in quite a healthy place. We didn't stop recruiting last year. We continued because we knew that there would be a point when we would get to this pinch point where we were losing people who we couldn't replace. So we did, as one of our strategic priorities, as Craig's already mentioned, one of our strategic intentions was to continue to recruit.
Sure.
So that's a summary of the report.
Okay, thank you very much, Tracy. Any further comments before I move us on to item 5?
A comment and a question, Chair, please. A comment is, it's lovely to see the head training going ahead. It's something I've always championed with all new people. I think at one time I used to use the word razor training, high training, and more the better. That's a comment, and that's excellent and well done. I've got just a quick question on the disciplinary grievances. We'll go down it on page 30. We've got harassment and bullying. That's 0 that we know of. Is there any indication of any like undercurrent bullying? I'm talking pure knowledge, by the way. There's nothing here, just something we need to perhaps keep an eye on, just in case there's any undercurrent about it coming forward.
And
is that clear enough?
Yes, that is clear, John. And I think Craig wants to respond to that comment.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor, I may have missed a bit, but are you saying undercurrent of bullying?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Well, I suppose what kind of underpins that is the staff survey we did last year,
Yeah.
action plan. So there is indications where staff believe they may have been on the receiving end of harassment and bullying. And what I'd sort of say, we don't take that lightly, and we do a lot of work around some of our EDI work and some of our management development stuff as well. But there's a kind of a spectrum. What we look out for as well is that those people who are a bit annoyed that they may have been asked to do something that they disagree with, and those people who have got genuine harassment and bullying complaints, but obviously dealing with each complaint, you know, genuinely, and obviously trying to make sure that the managers at the lowest level are dealing with these issues, because it obviously identifies some of the cultural things in the fire and rescue service. So I think we are very, you know, aware of it, and we've got a lot of governance and structures in place. So we don't, I mean, the good thing is we don't see a lot of formal things coming forward, but that might have been, of course, as well. There's not been a lot of interaction in the workplace, and people haven't been going out and doing things. So it's a little bit like your comment earlier about when we come out of all these things and we start interacting, what do we then see as well? You know, point is well taken and made. Thank you.
No,
Thank you, Craig, for responding to that. If people are happy, I'd like us to take us to item 5, which is a co-location, which, you know, should have happened by this time next year because it's due to happen next March. Tracy, did you want to speak to this report? Or
Yes, I will do, Shagufta.
Thank you.
So we referenced this actually to our last meeting when we were talking about the people strategy, if you may remember, because this is obviously a key change for the service, and you know, for a lot of people who have worked at our current headquarters for a number of years now. So we are very sensitive to the fact that this is a significant change for people and needs to be managed sensitively and effectively. So, you know, there are going to be the logistical issues around how do we move, you know, 120 people 5 miles down the road and share a joint headquarters with the police. So, you know, those are the logistical issues that are being worked through. So the ICT issues, you know, how we're going to do it, how we're going to share that space. So all those things are obviously going on and being dealt with. And we do have a programme board which brings all these things together so that we have an overview of what's going on and making sure that we're obviously meeting the deadlines and timescales that we need to. But for us, as a sort of the HR team, people and OD team, you know, our focus on the people aspect of that, and making sure that people get, you know, go through that transition in the most positive way that they can. And that, you know, when we get to the joint headquarters, people already sort of know the building, they know who they're going to be working with, and they've had lots of information and opportunities to engage sort of over the period of the transition. So the key for us is that ongoing communication and engagement, keeping staff informed. We do that via regular briefings. We have joint employee update events. So we've got one next week, for instance, next Thursday. To bring people up to speed on where we are, share some of the plans and the draft, you know, the drafts of the buildings and where people are going to be located. So that allows people also not just to get that information, but also to ask any question they like. It's a very sort of open forum where people can ask questions of the people who are leading on all those programmes. We've also recently formed what we've called a joint employee forum. So that's sort of volunteers from both the police and fire who can come together. They basically set their own agenda. They can ask whatever questions they want to ask. Sometimes they may take on pieces of work for themselves. or be part of consultation. So, for instance, at the next forum meeting, they're looking at some of our ideas, joint ideas about branding for the new JHQ and signage, and what photos should we have up in the reception, and areas like that where people are interested. This is where they're going to be working from. How we're going to use communal areas. What about kitchens? What about car parking? All the things that people are concerned about and want to know about. So, we're hoping that through that joint employee forum, we can encourage people really, who may not want to stand up in a bigger meeting and make a point, but actually can talk to a representative from the forum and say, I'm worried about this, and then they can bring that concern back in. So we're hoping that will be one of those things that will help us to engage proactively really with staff. There will be some contractual issues from our side because we're actually moving our work base. So we've been consulting with our representative bodies really from day one. So, it's a standing item on our panel meetings so that the unions as well can bring back any issues that they have fed back to them. And we also obviously consult with them on policy and the way that we're going to be managing the whole process. I think one thing I would like to say is that we have made sure and stressed that people understand there will be no redundancies through this process. Everyone will be going to the new joint headquarters in their current roles, with their current teams and on their current conditions of service. So, having been very clear about that, hopefully that will take some anxiety away from people who might have been worried about those things. So at the current time, we're going through a process of sort of establishing the workspaces for teams, who's going to work together in the workspace. So functional work teams are going to share the same space. So fire and police staff will work alongside each other. They'll still be doing their own roles, but they'll be in the same general work arena. And over time, that may lead to some changes to both sides, to the way we do things, because somebody does things in a different way and it makes sense. And so, it just gives us that opportunity to share experience and best practice and things like that. And the aim during the summer, when hopefully some of the restrictions are lifted, is that we will start organising team visits, so people go over, see where they're going to be working, meet the people they're going to be sharing an office with, so that we can start to get to know each other in a much more informal way.
So it's more of a transition.
So it's more of a transition.
Suddenly turning up with boxes next March.
Yes. So I think the under 2.8, I just referenced the occupational health team because they're part of my department, and they will be co-locating with the police's occupational health team. And we're currently working through the issues about how do we manage appointments, how do we manage clinic time, things like that. And we will obviously work to ensure that there's no disruption to any of that occupational health support that we offer during the transition period. So just to make that point really. So I suppose overall, just to summarise, we're planning, we're working as hard as we can really to make sure that this is as much a positive experience for both staff, for fire and police. And that, when we do relocate, which will be from sort of starting to relocate probably from January next year, but the main relocation being about April, that people understand what's happening, they have a positive experience with the move, and that we can start working, effectively from day one, really.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to be hitting the ground running, so it's a seamless transition.
Yeah.
From the public's perspective. Does anyone have any comments or queries that they want to raise at this point? I just wanted to say I think the Joint Employee Forum is an excellent way to kind of really just put to bed very quickly, people's concerns. So really delighted to hear that you've got that in place. And it all sounds like you've got it all in hand. In which case, can I take us to item 6, which is the whole-time firefighter recruitment? Tracy, did you want to take this one as well, or did you want
Matt's going to talk us through this paper?
Oh, even better. My apologies. Matt, are you happy to take this one then for us?
Morning, everybody. Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Just wanted to take you through the whole time firefighter recruitment campaign from last year. Obviously, we do this on a kind of semi-regular basis. We had a bit of a hiatus between 2012 and 2018, but then we went through a process in 2020. I suppose the first thing to say is that obviously COVID hit in March, April time, and this had a real impact on what is actually a challenge in normal times, and a real draw on resources. So it was all hands to the pump. Everything happened online. All of the festivals, as you know, in the city were cancelled. So Mela, Carnival, Pride, a lot of the places that we generally go to do a lot of our positive engagement and advertising of the role, none of that was able to happen. So all of that went onto social media, and all of the positive action that we usually do went on to Zoom and similar platforms as well. So Sony Roberts came back to the team as a crew manager, coming over from his operational duties on station. So he joined us around May time, and helped us to start to pump prime some of the positive action measures that you can see described at 2.3. As we always do, we target the advertising of our positive action measures to BAME communities, to women, and to other underrepresented groups. However, we don't exclude people from those sessions. So we had the webinars, which were attended by 170 people, 8 sessions, all happening at different times of day, so that we could capture different groups of people. And that was just a kind of familiarisation of the role, overview of the process, talking about fitness and strength education, so people understood those elements. These are all things that we would usually do face-to-face at SDC or at a fire station, and obviously had to do it all online. So those things were well attended. We did some mentoring sessions as well on interviewing techniques to make sure that people who may not have gone through interviews for a long time understood what we were looking for and how we run our processes. And then we did some literacy and numeracy sessions aimed at BAME candidates. And we managed to get some face-to-face fitness sessions done as well. So we'd got some online videos around strength and fitness, but we were able to deliver 10 face-to-face fitness sessions as well, socially distanced in line with COVID restrictions. So I suppose the process itself opened on the 24th of August, and less than a week we had 646 applications, which is not uncommon, and so obviously an extremely popular role, and Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service is obviously an extremely popular service as well. Which but the diversity of the candidates, considering that we weren't doing face-to-face engagement, I think was good. So 15% of applicants were from BAME communities, 12% were women, and 8%, which is high, were lesbian, gay, or bisexual. So which was really, really good. Obviously, you can see at 2.9, there's a table there for you to look at. I'm not going to go through it in huge amounts of detail, but suffice to say the success rates of those from BAME backgrounds was good. We from a diversity perspective, I'm looking for a kind of level, usually a line of not a dip in success rates during the process, and we saw that during this one. Women were slightly more successful at interviews, so their proportion went up to 17%, and so 5 were successful, and 4 people from BAME backgrounds. So more to do, and you know, if we're going to significantly improve and change the diversity of the workforce, we do need to do more. But given the restrictions placed upon us by COVID, I think broadly positive action work did its job. I think it's important to say that this isn't just about the positive action that we do prior to a campaign. We need to again be kind of more level across a calendar year, rather than kind of upping everything prior to and then dropping it all off. So obviously the appointment of a community engagement manager, Mohammed Yassin, into the organisation is really, really positive. That's a fixed term contract, and we've got a community engagement plan in place now, and Yassin is starting to do some of that work. And I think we're starting to engage much more proactively with BAME communities already, after a few months of him being with the service. So that's really, really positive. The candidates that came through that process, the first course started in April, and the next course I believe is starting in September. So yeah, really generally a very positive process, not without its challenges due to COVID, but yeah, successful, I think. And that's
Thanks.
all.
Thank you, Matt. And can we just for the minutes note the extra effort that and lengths and measures that you've gone to make it such a successful process, and to just minute our thanks to you and other officers for making it happen so successfully. And I think for me, it's just a complete delight. It just shows that if we do the positive action, even if we do it via social media, it reaps results.
Yeah.
Because if you hadn't have done that, we would not have 4 BAME candidates. We wouldn't have 5 women. We wouldn't have 5 people who identify as LGBT.
Yeah.
It's because we do the work, whether we do it via social media or face-to-face, being out there in the community, it reaps results. And I think without it, we wouldn't have such a diverse number of candidates joining the service. So just to kind of record my thanks as chair for the recognition of the extra work that takes, because that's a bit extra. So so that's a great result. Would anyone else like to comment or contribute?
Yeah,
John.
Thank you. Just a couple of short ones. Lovely recruitment figure, 646 applied, which is extremely good. The question is, we only got 2 transferees from the on-call cohort. Were they approached first before they went out for the public recruitment, shall we say? It just seemed only 2. I would have thought more.
I'll hand over to Craig because he's got his hand up.
Yeah, Tracy will come in as well in terms of if you want more detail on the procedural stuff. We have a migration procedure that we can invoke if we wish to, councillor. So people that have completed and are deemed as competent in the on-call service can go through a migration process if they want to, or if they're not qualified, they can apply for the normal process with everybody else. And so they almost get a go at going into the whole time. What I would sort of point out strategically, that's got to be in balance. So if councillors were to set us figures, for example, around diversity, and then say we're happy to migrate from the on-call, a predominant amount of our on-call firefighters are white male. So it would do nothing significantly for our diversity figures at all. So there's a balance there about what we're trying to do in terms of like the culture and the look, both physically, and visually of the organisation. And of course, all you're doing is stripping out from the on-call. So robbing Pete to pay Paul in some cases, and members will know we have a real challenge to keep on-call sections going. Because they have to give up their on-call duties whilst they come across into the whole time until there's a fixed period, and then they can obviously apply for dual contract. And then that increases some risk. It breaks down a lot of barriers as well. There are some real good positives about coming from on-call to whole time because we haven't got to train them in the same way.
Exactly my point, yeah.
So there is a process for doing it. but it's going to be a challenge, and particularly say where HMI come and see us and say, well, what are you doing about the diversity figures, because you're not representative. I mean, if we look at the figures around those that apply, we might be representative of the city and county as a whole, but if you take the diversity of the city into account, our figures are absolutely nowhere near representative of the community. So there's a real challenge there for us, whether migration continues to be an offer that we put out there, balancing the operational need and the diversity of the workforce. But your question, a lot of words there, Councillor, but your question is, do we consider that? Absolutely, yes, we do.
Okay.
And that
Thank you, Craig.
That's going to
Very
be
good answer. I've just one more. That's a good answer. Thank you very, very much for clearing that.
Well, we've got a second one. Go ahead, John.
Just an observation. It seems peculiar to me. I'm a former engineer, but in fact, all my life. Now, on page 32, 2.13, some of the applicants have applied seem to be declared have a disability. Can you clarify what sort of disability they are declaring? It still will make them successful applicants. That sound right? Yes.
I've not got the specifics of the people that have applied this time round, but generally what we find is that it is usually something around neurodiversity in terms of dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia. There may be some issues around mental health. And in those circumstances, we make reasonable adjustments. We make reasonable or physical.
I'm not bothered about it. I just seemed a curious thing to see, so I thought I'll ask the question and see what answers we can get. No disrespect from me. It just seemed peculiar being a former engineer when he had to have fully functions.
No, it's a fair it's a fair question, and obviously, the Equality Act and the disability provisions within that cover, things which are related to learning disability, mental health, non-physical, non-visible disabilities, which obviously
which don't impact the role.
Not non-physical.
I think Craig
expected. Yeah, thank you,
John. I think Craig wants to add to that. So
sorry, Chair. I've always seemed to have got something to say, but I suppose it's just me. Just making sure there's, I think, Councillor, your point is absolutely right. I think what it's challenging is the stereotype norms of what people see as a firefighter of the future.
Mm-hmm.
So people see this, people that looked like me, for example, when I was a lad.
Not as handsome as you, Craig.
I don't think I was ever a lad.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll end it there on that compliment.
In which case, can I take us?
Sorry, Chair. I think the challenge, just to finish on that one, the challenge is that we need to take account of the people that want a passion to be a firefighter, and neurodiversity and things that Matt taught is not a bar to becoming a firefighter.
No.
And we've got to look beyond the kind of physically fit, being able to carry another man out of a burning building, which very rarely happens. But we clearly need an underlying level of physical ability to be able to do the job.
Thank you, Craig.
Excellent. Thanks, Krista. Excellent.
Thank you. In which case, can I take us to item 7, which is kind of looking at the people strategy that we had in place up to and including 2020. Tracy, are you happy to present this one?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a bit of a joint effort between myself and Craig.
That's absolutely fine.
Yeah, well, just a bit of context, and then Tracy will pick out some highlights, really. Members will be aware at the last committee, we brought the current and extant people strategy about what we intended to do and areas we wish to cover, building on some of the successes. And this is really just to bring out some of the highlights from the previous one and basically close it down officially, and some of the lessons and some of the successes as well. So, Tracy, can you go through the bits and say Tracy's been kind of steering this through the last few years? So, I mean, it's her work, so she may well, it deserves her having the applause.
I think. Right, so basically, from, we looked at the new people strategy, the updated people strategy last time, and the elements of that are the same as they were in the previous, because we want that continuity and that building, of excellence between plans. So we look at, for instance, under 2.2, the way we deliver our services. So always ensure we've got the optimum number of people that we need to deliver our services efficiently and effectively, and also how we use that resource most effectively. So I suppose that without going into sort of all the detail in the plan, we've highlighted things like the joint control, which we established with Derbyshire Fire and Rescue Service in July 19, I think now, crikey, July 19. The changes we made to whole town crewing by bringing in a mixed crewing model at a couple of stations, the changes we made on call respond to incidents through alternative crewing, so being able to respond to the lower level, more minor incidents with a crew of 3 rather than waiting for six people to come out on a pump. In that time, there's been a number of departmental restructures to make sure that we have the skills that we need to deliver on sort of an ever-changing workload, really. Nothing stays the same. We need to constantly review the resources we've got and how we use them. So several departmental restructures in that time, bringing in new skills and experience. We did disestablish the Prince's Trust, if you may remember, during that time. And we've sort of been replacing that through a cadet scheme, which has been set up with Nottingham Police in order to engage with younger people. That's within our prevention teams. And we also in that time placed more of an emphasis on organisational development and cultural change, so our values and embedding them within the service. So a lot more of organisation development focus as well during that time in terms of shaping the workforce. Anything you wanted to add to that, Craig?
Yeah, Tracy, sorry. I am actually struggling a little bit. The sound is quite patchy my end, so I am struggling very hard to try and hear people. I think what the last people strategy did, it kind of set the tone of some momentum ready for this people strategy, because we are going to face significant challenges across the fire sector, not just in the county. So financially, as well as some of the reform issues that are coming our way. And Tracy's doing a lot of work around workforce planning that we're now beginning to discuss. So it'll be driven very heavily by the next RMP that members hopefully will be able to see in future anyway. So we're trying to make sure that we identify what we need to deliver to communities, and then the workforce and how we support them is best skilled and equipped, and we have the right numbers where we can afford the right numbers in place, and this strategy helps to bring all that together.
Thank you, Craig.
So moving on from sort of, I suppose, the structure and how we go about making sure we've got the right numbers of people in the places we need them with the skills they need, sort of moves us into sort of the outstanding leaders and workforce development elements of the strategy. So really outstanding leaders is key to really our succession planning. So making sure that we have those people in place with the requisite skills and experience and confidence, to meet our current and future challenges. So around that, we've built a leadership strategy, which sets a clear development pathway for our leaders, whether they be supervisory level or whether they be strategic level, having that pathway. We've established and built on accredited programs, so people, for instance, do ILM courses to become qualified at levels 3 and 5. We've developed an aspiring leaders program for those people who are interested in leadership. We started off with supervisory, so people who aren't managers at the moment but are thinking about it. And we've recently, this last year, set up a middle manager program for those people who are considering their next sort of career move, who are already supervisory managers. So that, that's to encourage the talent to come through and part of our succession planning. We've also put very much an emphasis on coaching and mentoring, and those skills, those be skills that managers are able to use in their management roles, but also establishing a network of coaches and mentors for people who would like to have that support. And also emphasis on some self-development, especially at the higher levels of the structure. So we've undertaken quite a lot of 360-degree feedback and provided individual support for that sort of personal development. In terms of workforce development, I mean, the service has always had a real commitment, and they fund training and have never cut funding for training, because it's so important and integral to providing that sort of service to our communities and making sure that people are safe. So, as you know, we have SDC, which is our sort of centre of excellence really for operational training, and we've been very much involved over the last couple of years, taking a lead role in the region for implementing what's called National Operational Guidance, which is being implemented from at a national level to make sure that the training that the operational firefighters received is of a standard nature and is of a high quality. We've been building that into our training programs over the last 2 to 3 years. We've, as you know, we've had reports. We've championed apprenticeships. All of our trainee firefighters are linked to the apprentice firefighter framework at level 3. So they all go through an apprenticeship framework, and we also have apprenticeships within our support establishment as well. So we're bringing people through. Hopefully, you know, they'll finish their apprenticeship and hopefully there will be a role for them, if not with us, with another employer using the skills that they've learned with us. We've updated our performance and development review process totally from top to bottom. And last year we did have a really good 96% uptake of interviews undertaken for performance and development review. And we've set up in the last 3 years our e-learning platform. So much of our learning can now happen online. There are learning packages that people can go and look at and work their way through, you know, in their own time. So this is a different way of learning for some people who prefer to learn this way. And we've actually recently won the national award for the quality of our e-learning products, and it's very much become established as part of our, you know, a whole range of ways in which we develop people. And ICT training as well has been certainly a focus in the last year or so, and we now have an ICT trainer. Just going through workforce engagement, we've talked about how important it is positive employee relations and informed, engaged workforce, and it sets out there how the things that we've put in place over the last few in the period of the strategy to make sure that happens. And it was really gratifying when we got the outcomes from the employee survey last year to see that people think that we do that really well, and they do feel informed and they do feel engaged. And then finally we had a focus on positive workplace culture and inclusion, and members will be aware through the updates they've had anyway through committee of the work we've been doing around that. So, you know, to have a workplace where people feel accepted and included and valued. So a lot of our values work has been around establishing that culture. We brought in the last year a behavioural framework, which is adding to that values work that we've done. Positive engagement, as we talked about in the previous report, with minority groups within our own workforce. So those people who may be BAME or LGBT or disabled or women who we want to give a voice to, so we can hear what they have to say and we can address some of the issues with them. You know, that will make the workplace better. We've introduced the wellbeing strategy in this time, and obviously very established occupational health support for employees and to maintain healthy lifestyles, and some of the things we spoke about earlier around the support we give to people who are unwell or need some extra support. And again, the employee survey outcomes were very positive about that, and the things that we've been doing. Inclusion is about understanding and addressing issues and promoting equality and diversity, not just in the workplace, but that's important, but also with our communities as well. So again, this is all around our values, about respecting others. So this might include targeted campaigns that we do through our prevention teams. We've had initiatives like the British Sign Language Initiative to make it easier for people with who may be deaf or partially deaf to contact the service. We've employed, as Matt has previously said, community engagement officer to make those links directly with communities so that we can get feedback and we can have a more of a presence in those communities. And also, I suppose, from the aspect of our own workforce, you know, the education, the importance of understanding faith and culture and why and how people are different and what we can do and how we can support them better. So that just to summarise, really, I know there's a lot in this report, and I'd like to think that's because we've done a lot over the last 3 years. But I suppose throw it open, Chair, to see if anybody has got any comments.
Any questions from the floor? I think I'm just aware that when we're sitting in meetings at a corporate level, whether some of this stuff does filter down to staff at a grassroots level. And I think the response from the employee survey, which shows that 81% of staff feel that the service is an inclusive and welcoming place to work, kind of reassures me, and I hope it reassures members, that actually on the ground, that is the experience of staff. And I think that has to be commended. And I'm encouraged to read that and to note that in this report. So, and I think, as Tracy alluded to, the future strategy just builds on this work that we've done. So I think pat on the back, which, you know, often we forget to do that, don't we? We just think about the work that needs to be done. And it's always focusing on what needs to be done. But, you know, pat on the back for, you know, what feels like not just a strategy, but that actually delivered for the staff and the people in the organisation. So can I move us on then to the next item on the agenda, which is kind of building on what Tracy was briefly referring to. And this is our inclusion and organisational development update, which I hope, Matt, you're going to present.
I believe so.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just some of the things that are in here, Tracy's covered as part of the strategy. So I'm not going to go through every single area, but I think it's important to say that, you know, as Tracy said, there's a huge amount going on in the organisation, and the OD and inclusion work is no different to that. The staff survey we've kind of talked about, but just to kind of reiterate really, the positivity, the positive process that we went through in terms of the response rate, an increase from 55% in 2018 to 62% is fantastic. And some of the headlines, you know, about recommending NFRS as a good place to work, great place to work. From a personal perspective, I'm really, really proud of the 96% of respondents know and understand our values. We rolled those out in 2015, 16. And over that kind of 5-year period, we've improved the recognition rate of the values themselves. The behavioural framework, which Tracy talked about, now seeks to embed that further. So the behavioural framework is very much centred on not necessarily just remembering what the values are, but are you actually living that in your everyday work? So it's split into 3 areas: employees, managers, and strategic leaders. And there's kind of do's and don'ts within that document. And Christine Wilkinson, who's joined us over the last few months as OD and Improvement Officer, is starting to develop the Shaping Behaviours programme. That's being rolled out in terms of workshops, training, e-learning over the next 12 months. So that's a really, really important piece of work to get those values and behaviours embedded further. Response to the COVID pandemic, really, really positive. Councillor Longdon mentioned harassment and underlying issues and that kind of thing. The experience of staff is that harassment has reduced, and it reduced across the board on a range of areas in terms of interaction with managers, peers, and with members of the public, because obviously we do sometimes have some encounters with members of the public which aren't as positive as we'd like them to be. So so that obviously not perfect on that, but it has reduced, and staff are telling us that has improved. I think it's worth saying that the BAME staff had experienced discrimination more than their white British counterparts, and that's something that as part of the community engagement plan, we're addressing some of those workplace issues through the BAME forum that Craig leads alongside BAME staff in the organisation. So we are keeping an eye on that, and we want to try and improve those figures as well. In terms of equality impact assessments, this is really, really important for members to understand, but also for officers to do the work as well, is making sure that we are analysing our services and policy in terms of indirect discrimination and opportunities to promote equality. And we've got a schedule of EIAs that Craig is going to be pushing across the service over the next 12 months, so that we are actually going to be EIAing functions in terms of service delivery, estates and procurement, and workplace as well. So a lot of work to do there, but some work has already been done on that over the last few months as well. Deaf communications tool, hopefully those of you who have been on the website and have seen some of the social media, we've developed a communication tool as part of our commitment under the BSL Charter, and that's to help our frontline staff, our firefighters, to communicate with deaf service users out on the front line when they're at an incident. Really, really kind of simple tool for people to use, so that they can tell us where the pain is if they've got an injury, or they can tell us where their gas supply might be in their home, and so it's trying to help those people who don't use verbal communication in those emergency situations and those prevention and protection scenarios as well. Future Leaders Programme, we come to members to tell you about this on a regular basis. This is a multi-agency project that we've been involved with for over 5 years. We have four of our staff on there this year, and I'm really pleased to say that they represented the service really well during the recruitment process. Really high performers within that recruitment process, and they're now involved in a 12-month programme. PDR process we reviewed last year. We've increased response rates, completion rates of performance and development reviews. Some of you may know them as appraisals, from 59% in 2019 to 96% in 2020, which
Wow.
is a huge, hats off to our managers who have pushed that further and have engaged with the process. We've simplified the process, we've shortened the form, we've put it into our iTrent HR system, and we've improved objective setting as well. So hopefully, if you're a firefighter on station, you can see how your work interacts with the work of the Chief Fire Officer and the strategic leadership team. So there's some golden thread between the firefighter's role and the IRMP. So really, really key piece of work. We've recently reviewed the 2020 process in time for this process, which is just kicking off this month. Behavioural framework I've already covered. Female development, I think we've already covered to a certain extent. Joe Dawson and Charlie Weatherall-Smith came to the Strategic Inclusion Board to talk about the Look Ahead programme.
Yes, it did.
And this is something that they've dreamt up and they've ran with basically, and I'm looking forward to see how that develops over the next few months. Leadership framework, I think Tracy's covered during her strategy update.
Yes.
And coaching and mentoring, we've been embedding this for the last probably 6 years now. I suppose the new thing that's come in is reverse mentoring. one of our crew managers is currently mentoring Craig as our DCFO, and I think, you know, he'd probably be the first to kind of talk about the positive impact it's had on his management and leadership in terms of EDI and generally organisation. I don't know, Craig, if you want to say anything on that.
Yeah, I mean, not much more, Matt, other than from a personal perspective. You get, I think the key is picking who the right reverse mentor is for you out of the workforce, being very open. It's very easy as you become more strategic in an organisation to be a little bit ignorant about what's going on. And what you need is a reverse mentor that's very honest and direct with you. And my reverse mentor has definitely been that. So, and as Matt said, you know, I believe I'm making different decisions and hopefully better decisions, taking into account that experience I've had.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and we've rolled that out a little bit further across SLT. So we've got 4 or 5 matches in place now. So more junior members of staff mentoring more senior members of staff, and that's generally on the equality, diversity and inclusion side of things. I suppose the final part of this is the competency framework. Katie Carey, who's joined our team in the last few months as a resource planning officer, she's going to be picking up a piece of work to develop competencies for Green Book roles, so support staff roles like mine. So we'll be developing a more uniform set of competencies for the 130 posts that exist within the support staff function. And that project will last 12 months. So that's just been initiated, and Katie's starting to do that work now. So a bit of a whistle-stop tour around the organisational development and inclusion work streams. Hope that's helpful.
Any questions or comments to Matt? John.
Thank you. A very good agenda, a lot of very good comments. And the way you've been putting things across, it all bodes well for the future of the fire service. Thank you, Chair.
I guess, Matt, I just wanted to add, in terms of the behavioural framework and the work that Christine Wilkinson is doing, is there an opportunity for the fire authority and its members for us to consider our behavioural competency, because it should run throughout the organisation, and as board members and as a committee, some of those attitudes are, you know, I mean, I'm always open to learning and happy to, but I just wonder if there's consideration to be given towards, you know, how that work can be embedded through the committee structure, even at this level.
Really good question.
Well, it's a takeaway. I'm not asking you to respond right now. It was
okay.
Just a consideration.
I suppose the thing that I didn't mention was the core code of ethics, which is coming into the fire and rescue service from the National Fire Chiefs Council, and obviously there's the review of the code of conduct, which Tracy is picking up as well. So, Craig, do you want to add?
Yeah, have you finished, Matt? Yeah. Yeah, I think Matt's touched on a couple of really good points there, Chair. There's the code of ethics that was highlighted by State of Fire and part of reforms around having a code of ethics within the sector. And that was driven by a lot of the cultural and behavioural and institutional things, that more the negatives that was pitched upon rather than some of the positives. So that's coming in. There's also something around future HMI, where what it takes into account around governance as well, Chair. So it may look at, you know, member inductions, for example, but I am aware from your constituent authorities, you may be doing some of these member induction things already. And we've also got the member induction process seminar coming up post the elections, obviously county and everything else. So we can start to weave some of those things in. I suppose it depends really, you know, it's how much detail we want to go into so that members don't feel they're repeating what they've already done. But we'll certainly take it away as you ask.
Thank you. Thank you. So conscious that we've almost finished the public part of the agenda. I just wanted to note for the minutes that sadly both Salma and I are leaving the Fire Authority, not due to local elections, but due to internal Nottingham City Council elections. Salma has successfully become an executive assistant, and I was unsuccessfully not re-elected, even though I did stand to be elected back onto the authority. So I just wanted to say thank you. It's been a pleasure working with all of you, and I do hope that our paths will cross in other places within the city and the county. So I'm going to invite us to move into the exempt part of this meeting, which I think we've just got